Welcome in to the second webinar of our fall semester. I'm Danny Rubin. I'm the founder of Rubin. We are an educational company based in Virginia, and we provide online resources to help students with their business communication, with their professionalism. And one way we do that is by talking with professionals in different fields about the job they do and the importance of being a good communicator in that job. And we're thankful to have Rick Velasco, a veteran of the HVAC industry. And he's based in Virginia. And we'll bring him into the conversation in just a few minutes. So Rick, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. I know the
Okay.
students are going to get a lot from all the years you've spent in the industry and all the wisdom you picked up along the way. You can send some back to these students as they think about this career. And before we dive into the conversation, I want to make an offer to the teachers because we have lots of resources beyond the webinar today. And one of those is truly an extension of our webinar series. It's an online career exploration library called Aspire. And I want to make an offer to the teachers today that if you would like access to a library of career exploration videos drawn from these webinars, but curated so it's more accessible to you, I want to make that offer to you and give you a chance to request it in the webinar room. So what you're seeing here is our resource called Aspire. If anybody in the chat uses Aspire, let us know. Some of you may be at schools that have Aspire. It's a big library of jobs, conversations with people in various pathways. You can see on the left, business management, health science, hospitality, entertainment, law, public safety, manufacturing, trades, marketing, STEM, and education. And if you go into any of these categories, you'll see all the people we've spoken to, and Rick's conversation will go here shortly. And you'll be able to dive in and learn about any of these people. And what we've done is curated the longer conversation and given you clips of like the highlights from the conversation. So these are like 1 to 2 minute clips. We've organized clips for you with discussion questions and certificates and labor statistics and lots of things to make it easy to plug into your curriculum. In the chat, can you please tell me what is everybody's learning management system? Does everybody use Canvas, Schoology, Google Classroom, Teams? Tell me in the chat, what do you use? Schoology, Canvas, Google Classroom. So this resource, there's over 70 jobs and 300 videos, and they live in your learning management system, whatever you're on, Brightspace 2. As one example, we have all the jobs in a giant Canvas module. And all you have to do is click on a job like a dentist, load it in a new tab, and the page opens automatically inside of your Canvas, no signing in. We eliminate passwords for students. So we are a big, broad library of videos. And we would love for you to use Aspire for a classroom this year at no cost. No cost for classroom use. We want you to experience it, share it with your team. If you would like to have Aspire, all you need to do, I'm going to give you a link right now to a calendar tool. And I need you to book a short meeting with a member of our team, and we will provide Aspire to you. That's it. There's no catch. We want to make sure that school systems are aware that Aspire is available. So this link I just gave you in the chat, if you're interested in Aspire, please go there right now, find time on your schedule, meet with us, we'll provide it to you. Hundreds of videos, 1 to 2 minutes long, curated, easy, all based on the people that we talk to in these webinars. A sports agent, an ER nurse, a welder, HVAC, AI software people, everybody. So please take advantage of this opportunity. I'll mention it again at the end. Okay, with that, let's get down to business, and I'll bring in Rick to talk with us about his career. Rick, let's start by telling us how you got into the industry and like just think back on those early days. and then some of the highlights of the work you did over the years. Just kind of quickly take us through your career, and then we'll start getting into some questions. So take us back to the beginning. How did you find your way into the job?
Well, at the beginning, I took small engine repair in boat tech, and my father was running three complexes for Drucker and Falk. So after school, I would go to his shop, and I would work on window air conditioning units for hours and hours at a time. They had them stacked all along this room, the ones that were bad. I learned from that and my father on how to change the motors in them, and I found that I liked doing that work more than I liked doing small engines. So I went ahead and did that for a year while I was in school. But then I went to Busch Gardens and they hired me as a refrigeration tech. In Busch Gardens, I learned a lot more. I was the ice machine king for several years, fixing thousands of ice machines all over the park. And I ran into a man named George Whalen, who was twice my age and very experienced. And he started teaching me how to work on the air conditioning systems also. After a couple of years there in Busch Gardens, I decided I needed a change and I went to Old Dominion University. There I was hired as an AC technician and I also went to school at night. During that period of time, I had accumulated the 6 years I needed to take my master's in HVAC and refrigeration. I went ahead and did that, and in 1984, I got my master's in HVAC and refrigeration and my master's in gas pipe fitting. From there, I went on to go in business for myself as a contractor, and I went to several small commercial jobs, mostly residential jobs, which is where you usually start in this field. You usually start learning on HVAC in the residential market, and you start learning a lot of times in installations. Eventually, I picked up a chain account, Arby's roast beef, for which I kept for like 22 years.
Wow.
And I was doing all the refrigeration HVAC work at all their stores, including about 50 independent restaurants.
Whoa.
That got started, and that's how I accumulated accounts. My reputation was good, and I got bigger and bigger. And I did that for 5 or 6 years before I went to work for a company called Professional Heating and Cooling. There, I went there as a lead tech. I made assistant manager, I made manager, and then I made vice president. During that time at Professional Heating and Cooling, I went ahead and got my master's electrical license also. And I've been doing it for 45 years and I'm
Woof.
retired.
Well, it's an amazing career, and there's so much I want to talk about inside of that. For the students, Busch Gardens is an amusement park, and I'm sure many of you know about Arby's, right? Raise your hand if you know Arby's. We have the meats, right? Make sure we all understand. He was doing, HVAC and doing work for Arby's restaurants for many years. As we get into this conversation, I want to ask everybody now, go to the Q&A along the bottom of Zoom, and I want you to put your questions. When you write your question, put your name and your school so we can give you credit for your question. So start thinking of your questions for Rick and put them in the Q&A. Okay, Rick, you've done so many different things in your career. You've done the work, you've been in management, and you kept trying to upskill yourself and gain new credentials and licenses. Thinking back on those early days when you were learning, um, what was that process like? What was it? Did you learn out in the field as much as you learned in the classroom? Was it kind of like 50-50? How do you think about those early days of learning the trade?
Well, when I started, the only one that knew anything about window air conditioning was my dad. So I basically started and was doing hands-on from the very beginning.
Okay. Well, that's what I think it takes. And I'm sure we have students in here now who are learning hands-on, maybe inside the classroom. And do you think that sort of each job kind of prepared you for the next one? You didn't always
Oh
know where
yeah,
you were gonna go, but you kept building your skills.
absolutely. I always hustled and I always tried to get better in my field.
Tell me about like I always remembered you working on with Arby's. That's very present in my mind. Like, tell me about like an average day working with Arby's or Burger King, the different chains that you work with. Like, what would a day look like when you wake up and you go to work? What were help the students picture what the day was?
Well, in the beginning, you went to a shop every Monday morning and you turn in your paperwork. You then get calls that they would give you, and after each call, you would call in, and they would give you the next available call. But they also would they would categorize it in ways that they knew you were really good at this, so they would try to keep you on that, like ice machines, for example, and walk-in coolers and walk-in freezers. But as I went along, they gave me bigger jobs working on centrifugals, and building AC units and so forth. Nowadays, what the way they do it, uh, they give you use your phone, and they have a program. All your calls come in. You check in the time that you're leaving to go to your next call. You check out when you finish that call. You write up a ticket and have them sign your phone, and that's the way they're doing it nowadays.
Okay. We're starting to get some questions in, and I want to read some of these off to you. Mac Williams at Fayetteville, North Carolina. How would you say the industry changed over the years? Because you spent a long time in it. So from the start till the end for you, what were the biggest changes that you noticed?
Well, everything when it went electronic changed. So, for example, everything besides your workplace, the equipment that was being put out on rooftops and so forth. And I did all commercial work, just in case you know. The equipment, they started putting boards, little computers in every piece of equipment, 10 tons and up. So that changed from your mechanical part that you first learned how to do, which worked off pressure switches and so forth. So now everything has more sensors and a computer board. And so the industry has changed tremendously for energy efficiency. And so one thing about this job is you never stop learning. It is not a job that you learn at one time and then you know it. There's always something new coming out every year, including the differences in refrigerants. Refrigerants have changed so much since I started. There was basically only 3 refrigerants used. Now there's about 10 refrigerants you can use.
Hmm. Students, this is great information. Tell me in the chat, students or teachers, he said that there used to be 3 refrigerants commonly used. Today there are how many? How many? What number did he just use? Tell me that in the chat. Now there's how many? Let me check the chat. Very good. Jimmy says 10. That is incorrect, Brady. Although Brady did tell me previously that he loves Arby's, so we'll give him that. But the number is 10. Okay.
At least, at
At
least, Dan.
least, at least it could be. It probably is more. Even now. Okay. So a question, and Rick, maybe you have a thought on this because I've seen another company in our area and others use this slogan: "Always on time, or you don't pay a dime." That mantra of like, if we're
Yeah.
a second late, you were doing it for free. Did you ever run into that type of like, your boss is saying to you or you saying to your people like, if we're late, we're paying. This is free to the customer. What is that whole approach about with
Well,
HVAC?
that has nothing to do with the commercial field.
Okay, that's more
Commercial field does
residential.
not do that. It's the residential field that does that. And what they do, which is kind of sneaky, is if they can't get anybody to that job on time, they will send a junior technician or a helper out to get there and start on it until the technician gets there.
Oh, so it's okay. So you'll never really get it free. They're going to find a way to get somebody there to just
A-
be there.
Absolutely.
Okay. So there's your answer. This is how they do it. It's a way to get you to use them, but you're never going to get their work for free. Um, okay. And what is the other question? We had a question. Please try to keep your questions in the Q&A, not in the chat, but I do see one in the chat. My students, this is Mrs. Morse, Hardin Academy, Hardin, Montana. My students are interested in knowing what would be the next step after high school graduation to start a career in HVAC. So if they're coming out of high school and they want to go into the field, what would you recommend they do? What would be their first move?
The first move, if they didn't take any kind of OTech classes or anything, the first thing they should do, even before looking for a job, is enroll in either any kind of community college that teaches HVAC, because that puts your foot in the door with most companies. They see that you're trying and you're trying to learn and you're enrolled in a nighttime class.
Mm.
They will more likely hire you than somebody off the street. And you will probably be a installer or a helper. It won't be great pay, but it'll be better than average pay. And that's where you kind of cut your teeth. You get in there and you start there. And what the good benefit about it is, you're going to school and you can ask some of your fellow employees questions about things you don't understand. So it kind of gives you a double education.
Well, and that gets to my next question, which is like when you were training people, what do you want to see from them that would say to you, like, they're going to be a great employee? They know how to hustle. What do you look for in like a junior tech?
I look for somebody who listens and understands and does what you say rather than what they feel like it should be done.
Hmm. Tell me,
Uh,
give me an example of that where like they'd say, no, 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 this is what I want to do. And you're like, I'm telling you, this is how we do the work. Does any particular example come to mind within the work itself?
well, aligning belts correctly on blowers. Some guys will just go out, put another motor in it, and belts won't be aligned right. Motor's burned up again in a year and a half from now. So that's a simple thing. The other things are a lot more complicated. From putting pressure switches on a semi-automatic compressor, which some people jump off the valves because it's easy and there's a port there for your gauges. So they put a T, but that's not the correct way. Because if you close that valve and that compressor is running, instead of the pressure switch turning that compressor off immediately, that pressure switch is not getting any pressure because you turn off that valve and you literally can blow the compressor up in pieces.
I want to ask specifically for the classes watching that are HVAC classes, the teachers in the chat, can you tell me it because we're getting into like nitty gritty work and good tips. Is this helpful to you to hear him tell you best practice after 45 years in the field? I'd love to know if the students really understand what he's talking about. And again, this will be on YouTube, so you can watch it later if you want to, catch some of this advice a second time. But let us know, teachers who are specifically focused on HVAC, what you think. Rick, I want to talk also about what you said in your initial introduction is that you developed a great reputation and you worked with certain customers for a very long time. So I want to talk about how you maintained that relationship, right? Because half of it is doing the work, and the other half is like working with the people who hired you. So what was your approach with like, answering the phone, being on time, all of those things that you think helped you maintain these relationships?
Um, well, I had a boss that did this. He got on the phone with a customer and he would start talking and BSing and trying to finagle and so forth the customer. I, I was never like that. I was always very direct and didn't try to suck up or anything. And my professionalism, they liked, and they liked the fact that I was knowledgeable. So when I talked to customers, they felt good talking to me. with my boss back when, they really didn't because they knew, he was going to just tell them whatever they wanted to hear.
Mm. Do you hear that, students? Don't try to tell people what they want to hear. Just give them the straight information. Be professional. Be on the level. Because Rick, you said you worked with Arby's for 22 years. Did I
Yes,
catch that number? You don't work with one customer that long without a lot of trust. Are there other things that you did over the years that you think helped create trust? Like you always made sure you checked the job twice before you left, or what
well,
else were
yeah,
you doing to create trust?
well, when I had employees working for me, I would still go out. I wouldn't sit in the office. I was not one to sit in the office. I would still go out, check behind them, check with my customers to make sure they were satisfied and happy. And like I said, I wouldn't give them the BS. I would be straightforward about everything. And
Did you
that developed a great relationship with me and all the managers of these different places and so forth.
did you ever have to like write up reports after the work was completed? Giving them something written down, or like was writing ever involved in your day to day?
Absolutely.
Tell me about
Um,
that side and how you had to be careful with what you wrote.
well, so if I had a technician and he wrote a ticket and he said, change blower motor, period, I wouldn't accept that. I'd make him rewrite it that he changed the blower motor because he found that this or that, whatever the problem was causing the motor to go bad, or the age of the unit, which is very easy to see on the actual tag of the unit. Um, I would make them go into a little more detail than
Mm.
just short-sighted, especially when you're charging these people $600 to $800 or more. You're not going to just put a change of blower motor.
Why do you think it's important that the customer has more information, even if they don't fully understand it? Why do you think giving them more detail is important?
I think because then they know that you are involved and know what is going on. Um, if you don't put a long description of what you did, they feel like, man, they're paying all this money for change blower motor.
Mm. That is great advice. And I always want to tell the students, no matter what the job, the writing and the communication is really critical. You're saying you have to sort of over communicate the work you did to justify what they're paying you.
Right,
Obviously, and you want them to know every single thing you did. It makes them feel better about, oh, well, I understand why it cost that much. Um,
absolutely.
so it's taking that extra time. And students, I hope you're hearing that, not just for HVAC, but any industry, is learning that the details make the difference. Michael said he appreciates hearing from an expert in the field besides the teacher. Brady Brooks says my students have trouble learning how important detailed invoices are. Do you have any comments, Rick, on when you send invoices? Maybe it's the same thing, just saying like, we did this and this and this and this. So they go, oh, okay, now I understand what this bill is all about.
Yeah, details are important. If you're just going to tell them one little one line sentence and that's it and bill them, they're going to have questions. So most likely you're probably going to hear some feedback from them. But if you write down a nice little story on what took place, how it happened, how you fixed it, it makes them feel this is a good invoice. This is what we should pay, and I don't have any problem with it.
I think this is such important advice because again, for many years you were sort of in charge of your own business, right? So
Yes,
you had to make sure that you weren't just doing great technical work, but you were like maintaining a great relationship. You had to do both things at the same time for your
absolutely.
livelihood. So you had to be thinking with both sides of your brain all the time, right? Because like you're working on the unit on the roof, and then the manager comes over and asks you a question. You got to switch back into like client relations mode and then go back to the technical work, right? You're kind of like having to do it both in your brain. at the
Yes,
same time.
yes.
I mean,
That's
that says a lot. It's not just for students who think they're just going to be working on air conditioners, refrigerators, and never talking to anybody. Would you say you'll be talking to people all the time?
absolutely. It is a public relations type of job, where you have to talk and explain things in layman terms rather than explain it to them in a way they're not going to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's important for students to hear. Okay. We have a question from Pete Davis. It's a very specific question. Okay. I don't know. Let's see if you know the answer to this. He says, with the EPA phasing out R410A refrigerant, will the new R454B be as effective or more problematic? Any
No,
thoughts there?
it'll be as effective. The things that change are your pressure readings might change a little bit, just like when you use 507 instead of R22, or any refrigerants, especially blends, usually will change your pressures from what you're used to seeing. So you have to be aware of that. And I tell you, there's little bit of math involved in being a technician.
Yeah, let's get into that a little bit. What kind of math were you doing?
Oh, you're constantly reading pressures and temperatures and converting temperatures to pressure and converting pressures to temperature. Um, there's subtractions depending on the ambient air around you. There's several things to consider mathematically when working on a unit.
That's great. And by the way, I want to point out to the students what I just did. He said at the end of a sentence, there's a lot of math to consider. So I did what's called a follow-up question. And I said, tell me more about the math that's involved in the job. So I heard something interesting. I was curious and I asked a question to learn more. And that's a question that the point I want to ask Rick, because when you're talking to, let's say you have a junior tech and you're teaching them, or they're like brand new to the industry and they're learning, and you say something that they may not understand, would you want them to like ask you to tell them a little bit more, or would you want them to
I,
just stand there with their mouth open and not say anything?
no, no, I want their input. I want to know what they think. And believe it or not, every once in a while, someone will come up with an idea that you never even thought about. So it's always good to keep your ears open.
Yep, and sort of lean in and say, tell me more about that, instead of
Absolutely.
just standing there against the wall. Yeah, that's what you would want to see from like a young employee, that they're like listening and they're thinking and they're curious.
Yeah, absolutely right.
We have another question, an industry question from Jimmy Sandoval. Have you ever vented refrigerant? You know what that means?
I'm on this I can't say that.
I don't even know what that meant, if what I just asked,
It's
but
illegal. Let me
uh,
just say that.
okay, I understand now. No, he has not. Um, Michael Hasselden said the new refrigerant replacing 410A is just as effective, but it is highly flammable. They are recommending pro press fittings on all applications.
Yep. Yep. I would tell you, with them going to propane refrigerants and flammable refrigerants, you cannot put any kind of valve on it and leave it on it. So in other words, you might have to open up a system and put two tap valves on it for pressures after you release the refrigerant or the propane. First thing you have to do is put a piercing valve on it and take out what's in it. The second thing you have to do is you have to put your own leads on the end of your tubes so you can solder on fittings. You can fix the system, and then you have to crimp shut behind the fittings, the copper, and braze it. Of course, it can't be leaking because it'll squirt out fire, but you have to braze it after you crimped it shut, and it's a sealed system. Anything that has flammable refrigerant in it has to be a sealed system.
I hope that was a helpful answer, Michael, to your comment. He just sort of built on top of your comment. I love when we really get inside the business, of whatever career we're talking about. I know that's appreciated by the students who are here to really learn that field. And perhaps today we've shown some students who weren't even thinking about this field that maybe it's something that they want to look into. And that's also
H-
a big part of it.
HVAC refrigeration field is one of the best trades you can get into.
Why would you say that? There's a follow-up question. Why would you say that?
Because you're always learning. Your mind is never going to go where it's repetitive, the same thing. Every job you go on is different, different types of problems. And so you're always thinking, it keeps your brain active instead of in lull. To me, plumbing, you kind of do everything within 2 years of it. And then it's just repetitive. With refrigeration and HVAC, it's totally different. It's something new all the time.
Great point. Couple final questions. We have from Chiquamagon. Did I pronounce that right? Chiquamagon High School in Wisconsin, Kelly Patterson. Looking back on your career, do you have like a kind of a crazy situation you were involved in, or like a memory that stands out, or a big job, or something that always like that was a wild client or something like that?
I had several big jobs that always stay in the back of my mind. I put all the refrigeration in Harbor Park baseball field.
Harbor Park is a minor league baseball stadium, a 12,000 seat baseball stadium. Okay, wow, that's a big job.
Yeah, I did the Obacy Hospital, putting 13 walk-in coolers and freezers in there, including the morgue. I did the Outer Banks Hospital, which I did the entire kitchen, the hood system, the gas piping, and the refrigeration systems.
Those of you
And,
students who know the TV show Outer Banks, he's talking about the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Go ahead, Rick.
and I just learned and did, I worked on cascade systems, which is something you'd have to be a senior tech to work on, but it's a system with different compressors that bring temperatures down to 60 below zero and so forth.
Wow,
That was at the blood bank. Um, I guess just those are probably the main
great.
jobs I did in construction, but I was more of a service company than a construction company. A lot of this I did almost 70% of the Chick-fil-A's on this side of Richmond. I put the walk-in coolers and freezers in.
Wow. Anybody here like Chick-fil-A? Hands up for Chick-fil-A. Okay, one last question from me, and then we'll start to uh, wrap up. And I want to offer this Aspire platform one more time. Rick, we have students here who are considering the field. What would be their first step? Could they even approach an HVAC company as a student and say, "Can I shadow? Can I just come in and observe?" Like, what would you say would be appropriate for them to do?
Well, that's not going to happen, most
Okay,
likely. Reason is because of insurance.
okay,
Um, the best thing to do is what I said earlier is get yourself in a school. Try to do it at nighttime. Then let the HVAC companies that you're putting your resumes in, which I'm sure you can help them fill out, let them know that you are presently in school for HVAC and see if you can get put on as a helper or an installer. And that's where you start getting uh, into going further in the career. You just need to get your foot in the door of any, and usually the larger HVAC companies are the ones that have apprentice programs. The
great.
small guys don't usually because they don't have time or anything to do anything but to continue to work all the time. While the larger companies have a lot more flexibility on training people.
Thank you. Shelby, I did see, I almost missed it because it wasn't in the Q&A, but one more question from Shelby Reynolds. Would propane-based refrigerant be deadly in a house fire? Would it cause more devastation? That's the question.
Absolutely, it would. But there are all kinds of precautions from that happening. If a house caught fire and you had propane, the amount of propane that you're using in a refrigeration system is is not even the amount of one of those little tanks that you use for lighting a grill. It's not enough to be a bomb or anything like that.
Okay. Thank you. So as we wrap up, I want to offer once more to the teachers here, if you would like a library of short clips from people across every pathway you could think of, it's called Aspire. Every job has clips, discussion questions, certificates, labor statistics, accessibility functions, read aloud functions, over 70 jobs across all of these pathways. It lives in Canvas, Google Classroom, Schoology, Teams, Brightspace, whatever you're using. And if you would like this resource, you just have to reach out to our team. We'll give you free access to Aspire for your class this academic year. You just have to go to the link in the chat that I'm going to give you once more and request a short meeting with the Rubin team. We'll meet with you, give you access to Aspire, let you share it with your students, and give you hundreds of videos in your learning management system across every pathway and job you could think of. We would love to spread that resource around. It's newish for us, and we want to make the CTE community especially aware. So feel free to take that offer in the chat. I want to thank Rick for his awesome advice, his experience, the technical information, the professional skills. You covered it all. And I hope the students appreciate hearing from someone who's really, truly been in the industry and knows inside and out what it's all about. So thank you, Rick, for your
You're welcome.
time today. I want to thank all the teachers and students for their participation. Thank you, Andrea, for your sign language. And just to look ahead, October 8th, I believe, or early October, our next webinar, we're talking to a drone pilot. Who's interested in learning about that? Hands up for drone pilot. This guy we're talking to, his name is Jimmy Olivero. He does drone footage for Netflix and Nat Geo. So he's really cool. He's doing shows that you've seen. Storage Wars, one of the shows he's done drone footage for, and movies on Netflix. He's going to talk about his business and how he runs his operation and how he manages drones as a company. And that's coming up in early October. Later in October, a dental assistant. So we got a lot of cool conversations coming up. I appreciate all of you being here today. And we will see you again in October. Thank you again for being here. Thank you, Rick.
You're welcome.